Imagine walking among the statues of pharaohs, uncovering the secrets of mummies, and exploring the biggest collection of Egyptian artifacts outside of Egypt, without even leaving Europe. I'm talking about the Egyptian Museum in Turin, Italy. In today's video, I'm going to give you a tour of the Egyptian Museum so you can see for yourself if you think it's something that you might want to visit on your next trip to Italy. From the ticket prices to the best times to visit and what you'll see while you're there, I've got you covered in today's video. Now, we live in Italy and have been living here for years, and since my son is a big Egyptian history buff, it just made sense for us to take the trip to Turin and visit it for ourselves. So now I want to take you along on that visit with us so you can see for yourself what it's like. The Egyptian Museum in Turin, or the Museo Egizio, was established in 1824. So not only is it the biggest Egyptian museum outside of Egypt, it's also one of the oldest in the world. It was founded by King Charles Felix of the Kingdom of Sardinia, who purchased most of this collection. And he purchased most of the collection from the French consul Bernardino Dovretti. Over the years, the collection has grown and grown and grown well beyond the original collection that was purchased by the king. Now today, the museum boasts an impressive 12,000 square meters over 4 floors of artifacts. Let's start with the practical information that you need to know before you visit. We ended up spending 2.5 hours there and could easily have spent more. In fact, the last half an hour, 45 minutes that we were there were very rushed, and we didn't really get to see everything that we set out to see. But with kids, they can get tired, so keep that in mind. If you and your kids have enough energy, you could easily spend 3 to 3.5 hours there. Now, the cost to get in is very reasonable. For a regular ticket for an adult, it's €14. For students between 15 and 18 years old, it's only €3. Kids between 6 and 14 years old are only €1. If you're there as a family like we were, you can do the family pass where it's 2 adults, 2 kids under 18 for €28. Seniors 70 plus can get in for €11, and all kids under 5 are free. That also includes disabled visitors and their companions. The museum is open 7 days a week. On Mondays, it's only open from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. And then Tuesday through Sunday, it's open from 9 a.m. until 6:30 p.m. But that doesn't mean you can just walk in when you want. They have certain slots that they open up for visitors, and you have to book those slots only. So you can't just walk up at 6:30 and get in. We were there on a Saturday, and it was really crowded. They only allow so many people in per slot. So they have a few slots per day that they open up, and you can reserve one of those slots. But it still does get quite full because not everybody finishes at the same time. I highly recommend getting your tickets well in advance. You can make a reservation up to 2 months before you plan to go. And as soon as it opens up, I would make those reservations. We booked ours a month ahead of time, and we still had very limited options for the times that were available for us to go. To get the most out of your time in the museum, you want to pick the best time to go. I think if you plan your trip for the spring, between April and June, or the fall, September, October, those are going to be the best times to go. We were there around the end of April, and even though the weather was a little bit rainy, it still was a good time to go because it wasn't too hot and the city wasn't very crowded at all. Also, keep in mind when you're planning your trip that the museum is closed between June 16th and July 15th. Now, the museum is extremely kid-friendly. That makes it great for visitors of all ages. You don't have to have kids to go there. As an adult, you'll get a ton out of this visit. If you are there with kids, it's very stroller-friendly. If you're there with a disabled person or somebody with mobility issues, it's also wheelchair-friendly. So that means there's really no limitations to who can go and enjoy the museum. The only thing are that pets are not allowed unless it's a guide dog. And in that case, you'll need a medical certificate. Another thing to keep in mind is that backpacks and large pocketbook bags are not allowed inside the museum. But they have lockers where you can store all that stuff. When you first get into the museum, you'll take an escalator down into the basement area of the museum. As soon as you walk in, you look to your right and you'll see a coat check. That's where you'll get keys to the lockers to store your bags. And if you are wearing coats, then you could check them there for a small price. Anyway, leave an ID, you get the key, and then you go to the left. All the way back, you'll find the lockers. You'll also find the bathrooms and baby changing stations. When you're planning your trip to the museum, you have a choice. You could either go without a guide and do a self-tour, or choose to have a guide. It really comes down to personal preference as to what's better. We went with just a self-guided tour. If you go for the self-guided tour, you can get an audio guide. That's what we opted for. We were just going to go through and use the audio guide. However, the app was not working on that day, so we couldn't use the audio guide. As you go through the museum, you'll find each of the exhibits has a card that gives an explanation of what it is that you're looking at. But without the knowledge of a guide, you really miss out on the context of it. So we regret not going with the guided tour, especially because we could hear those guides as we were going through and realized how much information we were actually missing by not having a guide with us. In fact, when we first went in, one of the guides that we first encountered was an actual Egyptian with a very deep knowledge of Egyptian history. In any case, when you're planning your visit, if you do decide to go for a guided tour, I've got a link in the description box below so you can check it out and see if that's going to be a good fit for you. There are so many highlights to the museum, it's hard to pick just a few. After all, the collection of artifacts spans thousands of years. But there are some notable exhibits that you really don't want to miss when you go to the museum. Probably the biggest is the Temple of Elysia. At least I think that's how it's pronounced. It's a rock-cut temple that was actually taken from Egypt and brought to the museum in Turin. It was set for demolition because of the rising waters of the Nile because of the construction of the Aswan Dam. So it wasn't looted from Egypt or anything like that. It's been reconstructed so you can go inside and walk around that temple. Then there's a magnificent statue of Ramses II. Ramses II was one of Egypt's most famous pharaohs. And there are statues of the god Isis and Sekhmet. These are two really significant deities in the Egyptian pantheon. What really stood out to me as being the most impressive, though, was the collection of the papyrus. It's a unique collection of papyrus scrolls that really give an insight into the daily life of regular Egyptians. They wrote about religious practices, receipts, all kinds of administrative functions, and they really provide a magnificent glimpse into what life was like back then. And on that note, there were all kinds of ordinary objects, not just statues of pharaohs and mummies, but I loved seeing all the little things that people used in their lives, from tools to sandals to clothing. That, to me, was the most interesting part of the museum. But if you're looking for mummies, it has plenty. They've got several human mummies, and my kids really got a kick out of the animal mummies, from a crocodile to numerous cats, even a cow. Another very impressive wing is the Gallery of Kings. This is where you'll see statues representing the pharaohs from the New Kingdom. Whether you're an Egyptology enthusiast or just curious about this incredible civilization, this museum provides an unforgettable experience. It's just filled with remarkable artifacts and so many stories. I think it's one of the can't-miss attractions in Italy, not just in Turin. If you have any questions about the museum or Turin or Italy in general, make sure you leave that in the comment box below. I'm always here to help. And if you've been to the museum and you'd love to tell others what it was like, leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear about it. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, and most importantly, come back for more videos that are going to give you all the helpful information that you need to plan your perfect trip to Italy.